In today's video, we're taking a look at the latest off-season rumblings. Are the Arizona Coyotes in danger of relocation? We're going to discuss the latest from Elliotte Friedman that he talked about on the Saturday headlines, outlining the next steps and what could lead to a Coyotes relocation, or could they stay? We'll discuss how things could play out there. Plus, we have some trade talk around teams like Vancouver, Vegas, and the Ottawa Senators. We actually had a goalie set a world record for number of saves in one game as well over in Russia. We have a potential suspension coming in Florida and some other news from around the league. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a lot to cover here today. We saw actually a pretty amazing feat here over the course of the weekend. Not something that every fan probably seen or heard because it was over in Russia in their VHL league, which is like a step below the KHL. But we saw a world record set for a number of saves in one game. And it was in a playoff game, in a quintuple overtime game. Russian goaltender Artemi Pleshkov made 124 saves. That is absolutely insane. If you think about a normal NHL game, average, I don't know the number right off the top of my head, but it's probably around 30, maybe in the low 30s for average shots per game. Even if we've seen teams go into, with high shot totals, which, because you do occasionally see 40, 50 shots, that's not super rare or unusual. And then you factor in like playoff games where you see a couple of overtime periods. We've seen, 70, 80 or I think a little bit more than that. I can't remember what the record is in the NHL, but I think it's like 80 some saves. So that is way beyond that. Now, quintuple overtime also is not something you see very often as well. But I can imagine how tired that goalie was, how much weight he probably lost, how much fluids he lost in a run of a game. That is absolutely insane. So good on him. World record holder. We'll see if someday he makes it to the NHL. So we'll have a chance to get more of a look at this guy in North America. But a phenomenal feat in a crazy, crazy long game over in Russia. Now, as we talked about yesterday, I was expecting player safety to announce a hearing for Florida defenseman Dmitry Kulikov. I believe he's likely going to be suspended here. The fact that he's having a hearing tells us that's pretty much a guarantee. It's almost extremely rare that you see a player have a hearing and not be suspended. It did happen, I think, once or twice in the history of this department, but typically, it leads to that. Yesterday, the Florida versus Tampa game, things got a little crazy, and he ended up delivering a illegal check to the head of Connor Shea. Now, I know there's some argument that Shea is a lot smaller. I think he's only around 5'9" or 5'8", something like that. And he was kind of hunched over a little bit, so I understand the size difference, and certainly played a role. But he did knock him square in the head, and obviously that's still going to be suspendable. He's given a match penalty. I thought the match penalty might have been a little much, because even though you can't deny, I don't think, that he did get hit in the head, I don't normally match penalty is more for intention. Like, if they thought it was a little bit more, on purpose, intent to injure, that type of thing. I don't think that's the case. Now, you can see other scenarios around that, but so Kulikov likely facing a suspension here. Probably not going to be too long, but we'll see. The hearing's not till tomorrow, so we probably won't know until later tomorrow into the afternoon or early evening before we know the outcome of that game, or that suspension, sorry. Some other roster moves from around the league. We saw the Maple Leafs juggle some players around. Calle Jarnkrok, unfortunately, was injured again. He's now on long-term injured reserve, so he's going to be out for an extended time, whereas Connor Timmins, defenseman who was on LTIR, has been activated. So that's good to see Timmins make the return. In Ottawa today, we saw them reassign young defenseman Max Gannett back to the minors. I know there was some talk earlier today that maybe Travis Hamonic was coming back, because he's been out on a week-to-week basis, but that's not the case. It is Thomas Chabot who returned. Sens played the Hurricanes already earlier this evening. Fortunately, the game didn't go so good for them. Chabot, though, did have a real solid game, including a really nice goal on a really sharp angle. But, unfortunately, against a really strong Hurricanes team, they didn't do so well. But at the end of the day, Chabot's back, which is the main thing. And Gannett goes back to the minors here. And the Rangers played the Islanders early today as well. We saw Ryan Lindgren, defenseman, who plays an all-out aggressive defensive style, warrior, blocks a lot of shots, etc. He ended up getting hurt today too. Didn't return, so it's looking quite possible that he might miss some time. And Vegas today also activated defenseman Alec Martinez. So he'll be jumping back here in the lineup in the very near future. Now, another situation I want to talk about before we get into the Coyotes is the Philadelphia Flyers and the whole Ryan Johanssen saga. Now, Danny Briere, the GM of the Flyers, has finally conducted an interview. He had spoken on this topic a little bit, but can I elaborate a little bit further? He spoke to the writers of Philadelphia Hockey Now. He had really had no idea that Ryan Johanssen was dealing with an injury, and I can understand why. He played for the Avalanche right up until the deadline. He was not out injured. He wasn't missing time. So why would you suspect that he's injured? The Avalanche clearly didn't disclose anything, which I mentioned before. I wondered if we might see the Flyers complain to the league about the Avalanche not informing them of this, but it's possible that Johanssen might not have even been talking to the Avalanche about it. It could explain to some degree, not entirely, maybe his struggles this year. Obviously, if you're not healthy, it doesn't make things any easier for putting up the production. I mean, he had a decent start, but then he really struggled. Was nowhere near what they were hoping for in a second-line center. I'm sure that's buyer's remorse here. I'm sure they regret doing that trade with the Predators last summer, and obviously an experiment gone wrong. Thankfully, they were able to move off the contract. It's believed, though, we saw the Flyers put him on waivers immediately. He cleared waivers, but they can't send him down because immediately after getting traded to the Flyers, he said he was injured. So the Flyers, according to Briere, had their team doctors check him out. And good enough, they did discover an injury, which is believed to be around the hip area, which is something he's dealt with before. We know there's no love lost between him and former head coach John Tortorella, who coached him in Columbus. It's believed that those two have not even had a conversation or spoken to each other at all. Johanssen, at this point, was not expected to go to the Philly lineup. He was expected to go to the Philly AHL team, and that can't even happen right now because of the injury. So for right now, they're not, I mean, thankfully, I guess in their case, the deadline's already passed, so they can't get cap relief by putting him to the minors. And at the same time, they can't get him off the roster, so to speak. So it's believed in the offseason they would like to move him at a 50% reduction because they've already been retained here on Nashville's end before the trade to Colorado. So if they retain again, they can knock his salary down to $2 million. So ultimately, they'd like to do that and get another team to take him for $2 million, but they may not be able to do that. They did try at the deadline because this trade to get him was done a little bit in advance of the deadline. They had a little bit of time there. Couldn't find a taker. But in the offseason, it's different. You never know. We'll see. If they can't do that, they would explore a buyout for sure. But I don't think that's really their intention here. So they won't be able to do really anything if he's injured and is not healed before we get to the buyout period or to the official part of the offseason when you see more of the activity. So it sounds like for sure that Danny Briere is very frustrated with the situation. And that's certainly not part of their plan. They really had clearly no idea. They're not happy about it, but they can't send them down. As I said before, it could be a costly mistake, and it may not be a case of the Avalanche doing anything deceptive here. It's just a case of Johanssen maybe hadn't really been dealing with the injury in Colorado, decided, I don't really want to play for Tortorella, so I'm going to bring it up now, and I wouldn't be shocked if he deals with the injury for the rest of the campaign so that he can be deemed healthy and they can either move him or buy him out. But the situation they're clearly very frustrated with. Now, the Arizona Coyotes was a hot topic last night on Saturday headlines from Elliot Friedman on Hockey Night in Canada, and certainly made it clear that relocation is very much on the table and certainly quite possible here from a variety of scenarios. Now, he does, again, reiterate that the preferred outcome and preferred scenario here is that the Coyotes win the auction and they move forward to build the arena. Now, a couple of things, though, that are certainly cause for concern, which is kind of causing the NHL to maybe prepare in multiple scenarios right now. Because if they're going to move a team, they don't really want to be doing that in June or July, preferably. Like when they moved the Jets, it was in May, and that was challenging. But they need to be ready for it. If the auction is not going to be until June, that's really unfortunate. I guarantee there's going to be pushback here, because one of the things mentioned on Friedman here is not only one of the biggest concerns of what if they don't win the auction. If they don't win the auction, there's no doubt the NHL is going to pull the plug and say, you got to move. And they'll have that relocation ready to roll as plan B. I have no doubt they're working on that behind the scenes. They're not going to come out and state anything publicly, but I can pretty much guarantee, based on what we've learned so far and what Friedman said, that they're working on almost like a parallel universe here in the background. So they're going to have everything ready to roll. So if something falls through or there's too much pushback from the union, because obviously the NHLPA has concerns not only about this whole thing not working out, but about the possibility this is going to take way too long. Because at this rate, it's believed that 2027 would be the earliest that an arena would be logically ready to be opened up for this team. So, we're 2024, and it's a long stretch here. Now, of course, it's most likely not going to be 27, to be honest. I mean, that's being, I think, aggressively optimistic is a good way to put it. I think it's more likely 2028 if you think about it, because it sounds like there's lots of prep work to do to even, like, if you think about all the steps they got to go through before they can even get shovels in the ground, it's probably going to be really late 2024, early 25 before that really gets too far along. And most of these buildings are taking 2.5 years or more. It's not unusual for to say 2028. It's not that far of a stretch. 27 is not, I wouldn't completely rule it out, but it's I don't know. It may not be the most realistic. And is there going to be pushback? Because there's already a lot of pushback from the EPA around playing in Mullet Arena. Can they extend their agreement in Mullet Arena? It was only a 3-year agreement with an option for a 4th. Clearly that would have to be extended. Is, ASU okay with that? There's just a lot of factors here. And at the end of the day, the preferred outcome is that they figure it all out, they win the auction, get an arena, and they stay. But there's a lot of obstacles against them preventing that from maybe even happening. So it's going to be a curious situation to watch here. And I guess the big thing for me is, regardless if they win the auction or not, because a lot of these auctions for land in that area is usually only one bidder. They may not even have any competition, but they won't even be able to confirm that they even have the land, instead probably till like mid to late June. So that's just really getting far along on the calendar. So, are they going to have the patience to withstand this? We're 2024, another 3 to 4 years while they go through the building process. I don't know. It's kind of crazy, but the NHL is getting a lot of interest on expansion. I'm sure they for a lot of other reasons, get this figured out, and we'll have to see how this all plays out. But relocation, I would think, likely would mean Salt Lake City. We'll see. An interesting story to follow here over the next couple months as we get further updates, but there won't be probably a whole lot on this story until June, unless there's resistance from the league that they don't like the plans or the timelines, etc., which we haven't really heard too much on that, except that there's definitely concerns. But are the concerns big enough to pull the plug? We don't know that. So let's see where this goes. Then the rumor front when it comes to movement on players in the NHL in the offseason. Let's talk about a few teams. We'll talk about the Vancouver Canucks. Elias Lindholm, certainly one of the bigger trade deadline acquisitions. First couple of games, he was scoring goals, had a good start. Since then, he's kind of tailed off, and he's playing a lot of a third-line role. Production's down. Certainly hurting his value as a pending UFA. That much we do know for sure as well. Lindholm, you could say, might not be a long-term Vancouver Canuck. I think when they acquired him, they certainly made it sound like they was very interested in signing him, and I have no doubt that was honest and true. However, based on their recent performance, we'll see how things go into the end of the season and playoffs. That could change again, but as of right now, I got to think that they're probably, especially for the money he's going to want, it's going to be very tricky for them to figure it out. And secondly, his value is falling. Unless they can get him to sign for less with the hopes that he can bounce back here. But a lot of people think that he very much was an Elias Pettersson insurance policy because they were not confident, based on how everything was going, that he was going to sign the long-term deal that they were hoping he would. Now that he has, I think that takes the pressure off from them getting this deal done. I mean, they did give up some decent assets on the trade, but if it works out that they have a really good season and obviously end up winning a few rounds in the playoffs, they may deem it to be all worth it regardless of they keep him or not. But Lindholm is a player that's could be one of the more interesting options in the free agent market if he makes it there. But based on how things are going in Vancouver right now, I wouldn't be surprised if they don't sign him, and he might be a player that they look to move as draft rights. Now, I know some of these guys we're talking about are pending UFA, so you think, why are they mentioning trade rumors? Well, for one, we're looking at more than just trade rumors. We're talking about player movement. So this is free agent rumors, trade rumors, etc. But a lot of times when players are free agents, sometimes if teams think they're going to lose that player, they try to trade them to trade their rights. So a team can kind of get their rights ahead of the curve here and have exclusive negotiating rights for a little bit before free agency starts. So I don't know. I think Lindholm's going to be one of those guys. I'm not so sure he's got a long-term future in Vancouver. Jonathan Marchessault is another name to watch as well. Vegas, of course, really strong team. Had a big deadline, made some big moves. They picked up Tomas Hertl, who they're going to be committed to now for a long term. Obviously, a lot of term and money left on that contract. They get Noah Hannafin, who they're very much expected to extend and keep there as well. And by taking on the Hertl salary and the fact that it's been pretty, not a guarantee. It's never a guarantee, but it's very likely based on reports that they want to extend Hannafin and keep him. So that's going to make it very, very challenging, if not close to impossible, to keep Jonathan Marchessault. He's one of the few players that are going to be needing a new contract that, he could easily get squeezed out of there. And we know Vegas is not afraid to make that cold move. It doesn't matter how attached the guys are. They're very much business only. Like, they cut ties with Fleury like nothing, and they can do it again. I mean, Marchessault is 33. He'll be 34 next year. He was their playoff MVP last year, having another strong season. It will play another big role in any success they have in this year's playoffs too. But he's a player who's thrived there in Vegas. In all honesty, I think he would get a ton of attention on the free agent market. There's no doubt. I know there was some reports earlier this year, if he hit the free agent market, about returning to his home province, playing in Montreal. I'm not so sure about that. I mean, it's a possibility. I think the Habs would probably be interested in making several moves, including bringing in some top young players. And if they can move on from a few of their veterans and bring in a few other guys like him, I can see that maybe being something that they would be interested in. But until they can move off of contracts like Josh Anderson, Brendan Gallagher, I don't know if they really want to take on too many more, but he's a really good player. He's not slowing down with age. It's going to make things very interesting to see if Vegas can figure out a way to do this. If they don't, if they do keep him, I should say, that means that they're going to have to likely part ways with a name of a player that we're not expecting right now. So we'll see where that goes. I know Logan Thompson's a name to probably watch this offseason as well. He might be a kind of under-the-radar goalie pickup for some of the teams that are looking for goaltending help in the offseason. Speaking of goaltending help, a team that needs it probably almost worse than anybody is Ottawa. Ottawa's goaltending of Korpisalo and Forsberg is arguably the worst in the league. Statistically, in many categories, the worst in the league. We saw Forsberg get lit up today by the Hurricanes again. After a 3-game winning streak, they're again had a terrible effort in that sense. I mean, it was a close game after 2 periods. Right up till the last minute of the second period, it was 2-2, and they ended up falling 7-2. Third period, things completely fell apart. Forsberg, I mean, some of them goals, you can't blame him, but there's some of the ones he definitely should have had. There was a bit of a bad luck, good luck. The Sens had 2 or 3 really good chances that should have went in and didn't, and it went in on the other end. But still, at the end of the day, the goaltending has been by far their Achilles heel. You can't win when you're not getting the saves. It's just that simple. And, in the intermission, Bruce Garrick was talking about how goaltending is definitely something that they need to address. He says that they have not really talked about or considered a Korpisalo buyout as of yet. I honestly do doubt that. I don't know how they could not at least talk about it and look at it. The numbers on a per-year basis, yes, he's got 4 years left. So it's a long term to be committed to it if you bought it out. But the amount per year is not really all that bad. And you got to do something here. He mentions trading Forsberg as an option because he'd have a little less term, better value, and would be a lot easier to move on from the final year of Forsberg than it would be the final 4 of Korpisalo. He said there was some conversations around trade and around Korpisalo at the deadline, but teams were not really all that serious because they didn't really like the contract. The Sens would have had to eat a fair bit of money, and they didn't necessarily want to do that. But if you can find a team to take Korpisalo at 50%, I almost think you have to do it. I mean, at the end of the day, if you do a buyout, you're tied to that contract for 8 years. Might be a little less per year, but not drastic. Whereas if you retain half, $4 million per year over 5 years, that's not so bad. They got to do something. So I know Gary Ox says a buyout for Korpisalo is not likely or even discussed at this point. I really doubt it. He also said today that Hamonic was the defenseman coming back, not Shabbat. So I don't know that he's as well connected as he once used to be under the Melnyk era. Not saying he's unreliable, because I don't think that's entirely the case, but I'm not sure that his sources are as reliable as they used to be with being accurate. But we'll see on that front. Does goaltending need to change? Absolutely it does. They were already rumored to be in a lot of the different conversations around guys like Allmark and UC Saros that have been available. It's going to be a huge cost to acquire one of those guys, though. It's not going to be easy, but they're going to have to bite the bullet and make some change. Even if they can get league average goaltending, they would be so much better of a team. Because a lot of nights, and way too often, they're getting like sub 900, 890 or 880 goaltending, and that's just not going to cut it. You need to make a save once in a while, and that's been by far the biggest story of their season, in my opinion, not to go along with injuries like Josh Norris, for example. But let me know your thoughts. Goaltender for the Sens like Forsberg likely could be traded this offseason, but who should they target to enter this crease, and really what's the solution there in Ottawa between the pipes? Let me know your thoughts on that down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around, and we'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.